Hat, sunglasses, Pepsi, notes, sources, thick skin. Check. You already know. Let's go. Golden Blooded is a college football YouTube channel for entertainment. So make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, and let's get into our next college football video. Don't forget to send gear to represent your team. The address is P.O. Box 360, Liberty, South Carolina 29657. Yesterday, I did a video on the teams that I think will fall as far as how they did in 2022 and how they will do in 2023. Well, today I'm going to talk about the teams that I think will rise as far as how they did in 2022 and how they will do in 2023. And I'm just doing the Power 5 conferences. I really don't think there's going to be any major jumpers in the AAC because they're adding UTSA. I think UTSA will win the AAC just like they did Conference USA last year. So really nobody in particular that I think will make a jump, possibly East Carolina. But I want to talk about Power 5 conferences. So the first conference is the ACC. Who do I think will rise in the ACC? Well, the first team already made their rise last year, and that's Florida State. Last year they went 10-3. I think this year they'll be even better. I'm thinking Florida State will go 11-1. And remember, this is just a preliminary video. The 2022 season just concluded not too long ago. I will update this list as the season goes on, as the transfer portal winds down, and then we'll have a much better idea right before the 2023 season. But I still like making these videos. I do think Florida State will be a really good team. I have them going 11-1, only losing to Clemson, and only because it's on the road. And I think the ACC Championship will actually be a rematch between Clemson and Florida State, because remember, the ACC doesn't have divisions, so it's not the Atlantic Division winner versus the Coastal Division winner. It's just the two best teams will play in the ACC Championship. So I think it will be a rematch. The key games for Florida State, of course, at Clemson. I do have that as a loss, but man, if they were to win that game, Florida State could have an undefeated season. But a road game that they must win that might be tough will be Pitt. Pitt has been pretty good here recently, and that's coming from a West Virginia fan. I don't like saying that, but they have been good. I think they'll be good again, so that will be a test for Florida State. I think Florida State wins that, but it's a test that you must pass. And then finally, the out-of-conference game, LSU in Orlando, the first game of the year. If you happen to lose that game, which I don't think you will, that might set the tone for an actual letdown season this year. So a lot hinges on that first game versus LSU in Orlando. Another team in the ACC that I think will rise this year, and that's Louisville. Scott Satterfield is out, and Jeff Brom is in. That's a decent hire, but I don't think that's the best hire that Louisville could have done. But it's a decent hire, and I do think it's better than Scott Satterfield. Louisville has a lot of talent. I think they will make another step forward this year. Key games, Georgia Tech in Atlanta, only because it's the first game of the year, and I do think Georgia Tech is a better team. You lose that game, and maybe the rest of this prediction is out the window. The other four key games are Notre Dame at home, at NC State, at Miami, and at Pitt. I don't think that road game to NC State is going to be all that bad because I have NC State taking a step backwards. Man, if Louisville can beat Notre Dame at home, that will be a big-time morale boost. And then at Miami, Miami can be tricky. Miami does have talent, but they let me down last year. I predicted them to have a 10-win season, so I'm not willing to go that far out on a limb for Miami. But I do think they will be better this year. And then at Pitt, of course, Pitt has been good consistently. I think Louisville will take a step forward this year. I think they will sniff a 10-win season. Next team is, of course, Georgia Tech. They went 5-7 last year, which, by the way, Louisville went 8-5. I don't know if I mentioned their record, just in case I forgot that. But Georgia Tech went 5-7. Brent Key did a decent job stepping in his first year, and he will be trying to get Georgia Tech to a bowl. And I think he might succeed. Now, Sims transferred out. He was the starting quarterback to start the season, but they still did all right after that. They still managed to beat North Carolina. That's a pretty good win. And I think the key for this year as far as Georgia Tech getting to a bowl, first of all, you have to win 3 of those first 4 games, and one of those games is against Louisville. I don't think you're going to beat Ole Miss, so it's Louisville, and I believe Miami of Ohio and Bowling Green. Those 3 games you have to win. Then the other games that I think you would need to win would be, it's Louisville, SC State, the FCS, and then Bowling Green. So if you can win 3 out of those first 4 games, all you have to do is manage 3 more wins. And I do think there's 3 other wins left on the schedule. I think Georgia Tech takes a slight step forward and gets to a bowl. That's a big deal. The difference between 5-7 and 6-6 for Georgia Tech is a big deal. And finally, I've already talked about them a little bit, and that's, the Miami Hurricanes. They went 5-7. I don't think they're going to be a 10-win season, but I do think they'll get back to a bowl. But there's 2 games on their schedule that maybe, if they win, could propel them into getting to a 10-win season. And that's Texas A&M at home, who they barely lost to on the road, and then at Florida State. If they can somehow manage to win both of those games, then the Miami Hurricanes might be sniffing a 10-win season. The next conference is the Big 12. The first team that I think will take a step forward is, of course, Oklahoma. They took a massive step backwards last year, went 6-7. I think they'll be better, but not elite. I think Brent Venables will have the defense playing at a much higher level. It was actually their offense that was the best part of their team last year. I think the defense will catch up to their offense. I think Oklahoma is looking at an 8-4, 9-3 type of season. The next team is Baylor. Last year, they went 6-7. They had a blowout loss to Kansas State, but other than that, the rest of their losses were by 9 points or less, and that was at the upper half as far as margin of victory. Most of them were actually really, really close. I think a few of those games do get flipped, and Baylor could be looking at a 9-3, possibly a 10-win season. Baylor still has a lot of talent over there, and I still have faith in Dave Aranda as a head coach at Baylor. Look for Baylor to take a step forward and finish in the upper half of the Big 12 out of 14 teams, so that's a big deal. And finally, the last team out of the Big 12 that I think will take a big step forward this year is Texas-Tech Red Raiders. They went 8-5 last year. I already apologize to Texas-Tech fans because I jumped onto them for firing their previous head coach and then hiring Joey McGuire. Turns out that was a great hire. In my personal, humble, gold-and-blued opinion, I think the Big 12 championship will be Texas. So yes, I'm predicting Texas to also be better this year against Texas-Tech in the Big 12 championship. I think the Red Raiders will surprise a lot of people, but not me. They're going to be a really good team. The next conference is the Big Ten. I think Wisconsin will take a step forward this year. Luke Fickell, home run hire. He is a Midwest guy. I think that's a great hire. He's going to recruit at a high level over there at Wisconsin. I think that first road game at Purdue on September 23rd, that's a pretty important game. I think Wisconsin does go on the road and takes care of business because I think Purdue takes a slight step backwards. And that's a big deal because in your head, hey, we just beat the Big Ten West champions. Then on top of that, the rest of your road games at Illinois, at Indiana, at Minnesota, very, very, very manageable road slate. I know you get Ohio State at home, and that's probably going to be a loss, but this is a very manageable road slate because I think Illinois takes a step backwards. So really, the toughest road test besides Purdue will be Minnesota. So I think Wisconsin can win 3 out of those 4 road trips. So I think Wisconsin finishes a solid 9-3 this year. And finally, the other team in the Big Ten, Nebraska. Am I going to fall for it again? Not quite. Matt Rule gets Nebraska to a bowl. And that is a step forward from 4-8. I'm not saying Nebraska is going to be great. I'm just saying they're going to get to a bowl. The key is to split the road games between Minnesota and Colorado at the beginning of the year. If you split that, then Nebraska is headed to a bowl, and I think they can do that. Next is the Pac-12. Who do I think will take a step forward? Arizona. Arizona looked really, really good. Yes, they finished 5-7, but you could see that they were improving. Remember, they beat UCLA, but lost to Cal. As long as they can be more consistent, and I do think they will, I think Arizona takes a step forward this year. The out of conference is FCS Northern Arizona at Mississippi State and UTEP. I think they most certainly win 2 out of those 3. Maybe they can go on the road and beat Mississippi State and sweep their out of conference. And then you look at their in-conference schedule at Stanford, Washington, at USC, at Washington State. Survive those 3 games. In other words, at least win 1 of them. And the rest is Oregon State, UCLA, at Colorado, Utah, at Arizona State. So I'm counting 8 possible wins. I think you definitely beat FCS Northern Arizona. I think you definitely beat UTEP. I think you definitely go on the road and beat Stanford. I think you definitely beat Oregon State because I think Oregon State takes a step backwards this year. I know they get DJ Uiagalelei. That really doesn't impress me. I think you go on the road and beat Arizona State. I think you're capable of beating UCLA again this year. It's at home. And you can go on the road and beat Colorado. Even though I do have Colorado improving, that's a winnable game. And then going on the road and beating Washington State. That is 8 possible wins. I think 6 of those are locks. And then 2 of those could go either way. So yes, I think Arizona takes a step forward and gets to a bowl. Either 6-6 or 7-5. Finally, Colorado. Listen, anything is better than last year. They went 1-11 and they were one of the worst college football teams. The worst college football team in the nation. And one of the worst of all time. In comes Deion Sanders, and I do think Deion Sanders will get Colorado to a bowl. The transfers are flowing into Colorado. A top 10 transfer portal class. That is amazing. And I think he will also recruit at a high level at Colorado. Games to look at TCU. TCU takes a tremendous step backwards, so I actually think that is a winnable game. Nebraska, who I just talked about from the Big Ten. Colorado State, and at Oregon. During that stretch, you must go 3-1, and I do think they will go 3-1 with their only loss probably at Oregon. So I think Colorado can sneak to a bowl at 6-6, and yes, that is a massive improvement from a terrible 1-11 team. And finally, the SEC. Two teams I think are on the rise, and that's Missouri. Defense was legit last year. I think the offense will catch up this year. Out of conference is FCS, South Dakota, Middle Tennessee, Kansas State, and Memphis. I think Missouri is capable of going undefeated 4-0. Remember, Kansas State, that's a home game, and I do have Kansas State taking a slight step backwards. So yes, very possible to go 4-0. And then, of course, their road slate. This is not that difficult. Vanderbilt, I think that's a win. Kentucky, I think that's a win. Georgia, nope, that's a loss. Arkansas, that's iffy. So just right there, that's 6 wins getting to a bowl. And yes, I think they'll win a few of their home games as well. And boom, there you go. Missouri takes a step forward and gets to either 8-4 or 9-3. And finally, the last team we're going to talk about from the SEC is Texas A&M. They got a new offensive coordinator. I think Jimbo Fisher is feeling the heat. I think he might pull a Jim Harbaugh because remember, they turned the heat up on Jim Harbaugh. And I think Texas A&M will be a really, really good team. And I think they'll battle their way up to number 2 in the SEC West. And if they can beat Alabama at home, remember it's a home game this year, who knows, maybe Texas A&M could win the SEC West. I like Alabama to win the West, but I like Texas A&M to surprise everybody and be a really, really good team and give Alabama trouble. So y'all let me know in the comments section, what do you think about my teams that I think will be on the rise this year? Did I leave anybody out? Are there some glaring issues where you're like, why did you not mention that team? Because I always get those comments. That's all I got for you for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.